Adnan Syed, the subject of the hit podcast Serial, which became a nationwide sensation, is officially a free man tonight. Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby dropping all charges for the 1999 killing of his ex-girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. And while I've long had concerns about Syed's case, I also have concerns regarding the motivation of Marilyn Mosby, who led this effort and who is under indictment herself. On September 19th, Circuit Court Judge Melissa Finn overturned the now 41-year-old's conviction, something Mosby had pushed for. Syed was allowed to return home under home detention with GPS location monitoring. The judge had given Mosby's office 30 days to either retry him or formally dismiss the case. Prosecutors claimed they were still awaiting results of DNA evidence related to the case. But as I said at the time, there was no way Mosby would be retrying the case, no matter what the DNA showed. There was just no way she would have advocated he be set free based on other suspects and faulty evidence and then decide to retry him. And today, she made it official. As expected, she attributed it to the new DNA tests.
This morning, I instructed my office to dismiss the criminal case against Adnan Syed following the completion of a second round of touch DNA testing of items that were never tested before. Those items include skirt, pantyhose, shoes, and jacket of Miss Hae Min Lee. Although no DNA was recovered from the skirt, the pantyhose, or jacket swabs, there was a DNA mixture of multiple contributors on both Miss Lee's shoes. The same multiple contributor for both of Miss Lee's shoes. And most compellingly, Adnan Syed, his DNA was excluded.
Now, I've long said I had doubts about the case against him, but finding multiple sources of DNA on her shoes, which she walks with presumably, isn't that compelling to me. Let's take a step back. 18-year-old Hae Min Lee declared missing in 1999. 4 weeks later, her body is found in a Baltimore park. Suspicions around her ex-boyfriend, Adnan Syed. The theory was that he was so enraged by the breakup that he killed her and then admitted it to a friend who says Syed showed him the body and did eventually lead police to the victim's missing car. Syed's first trial in December of 1999 was a mistrial. A second trial took place in 2000, where he was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. The podcast Serial was released in 2014, and it dug deep on every twist and turn in the case. He was interviewed on the podcast and has always maintained his innocence.
I mean, no way. I had absolutely nothing to do with Hae's murder. It is what it is. If someone believes me or not, I have no control over it.
In 2016, a lower court ordered a retrial on grounds that his original attorney, who died in 2004, did not contact an alibi witness and provided ineffective assistance of counsel. But after a series of appeals, one of which he won, Maryland's highest court in 2019 ultimately denied him a new trial. Now, those renewed appeals occurred after the world became focused on the case, with all the armchair detectives and additional resources from supporters around the world. And after a case works its way through the courts to the highest court in the state, it is very, very hard to get a new trial at that point. But in September, Mosby's office filed a motion saying a lengthy investigation they conducted with the defense uncovered new evidence that could undermine Syed's conviction. The state argued that there were numerous problems with the conviction, including that the state committed what's called a Brady violation, meaning they failed to share potentially exculpatory evidence with Syed's defense, and that new evidence had been developed that undermined the sanctity of the conviction, including two other possible suspects in the case, both with records of prior violence towards women, and one who they say threatened to kill Lee. And tonight on Cuomo, Mosby said this.
There was exculpatory evidence that was sat upon and was not provided to defense counsel.
For bad reason?
The outcome of the case.
Was this misfeasance or malfeasance? Was this them not doing the job well, or was it not doing the job well on purpose?
What I can tell you is this. I can't tell you the intention of the individual prosecutors. I can say that there were two alternative suspects in this particular case, one of whom had motive to kill this beautiful young woman.
All right. I continue to ask the question, why aren't more people asking questions about Mosby's motivations here? Who's been trying to divert public attention away from her own legal drama. This show covered her federal indictment on 2 counts of perjury and 2 counts of making false statements on mortgage applications in connections with the purchase of 2 vacation homes in Florida. That case took a wild turn when Mosby made explosive charges of corruption and racism against the federal prosecutors who charged her.
I expected as a state's attorney that, fighting for racial justice in the criminal justice system, fighting to end mass incarceration in a state where you have the largest sort of incarceration of Black people in the entire nation, I understood that I was going to get pushback. I never expected the lawsuits, and I never expected to be on this side of the fence when the only thing that I'm attempting to do is to provide equal justice to all, regardless of race, sex, religion, and occupation.
Right, but I'm, and many others, not the only ones who are asking these questions. So is fellow Democrat, the state's Attorney General, Brian Frosh.
Maryland courts have repeatedly found that Adnan Syed committed this murder. And I have to say, if State's Attorney Mosby were concentrating as hard on trying murder cases and putting murderers behind bars, I think, as she has on this case, I think our state would be quite a bit safer. The timing of the investigation, right on what was to be the commencement of the trial against her, the timing looks, shall I say, unusual.
Her trial has now been delayed. Joining me now is former Baltimore City Prosecutor Jeremy Eldridge. Jeremy, thanks for coming back on the program. Appreciate it. So are you at all surprised here that there won't be another trial for Adnan Syed, or did you expect that there was no way she could possibly decide to retry him after everything she's already said?
I don't think any lawyer in Baltimore City thought for a second that when the conviction was overturned, when it was vacated, that in some way, shape, or form that Marilyn Mosby's office ever sought to retry Adnan Syed. The question really in the public sphere was the Attorney General going to step out and file charges? Was the DNA going to come back as being Adnan Syed or being one of the 2 suspects that were mentioned? What wasn't expected was to now have a second court hearing where Hae Min Lee's family was not notified, had no participation in the process, and to violate the Victims' Rights Statute for a second time, that was completely unexpected.
I'm still hung up on the DNA piece of this. I want to play a piece of sound from Marilyn Mosby's press conference today, number 2.
Touch DNA, and touch DNA analyzes the skin cells left behind on evidence at a crime scene and has been available since about 2003. As you know, this case was originally prosecuted in 1999. So because of the advances in DNA, we were able to extract DNA from her shoes.
So do you have all of the DNA back now?
Again, it's still an open and pending case, but with regard to Adnan Syed, the case is finished.
What do you make of this DNA on the shoes issue?
Well, the first thing is, when we're talking about touch or trace DNA, we know that at the time that Adnan Syed was arrested and charged, that the analysis of that DNA simply was not available. The issue about the shoes is more interesting. Rabia Chaudhry, who has been an advocate of the Syed family since the inception of this case, has argued for a long period of time that she believed and the family believed that 2 or more individuals were dragging Hae Min Lee's body and that they removed the shoes, put them in the car, and then essentially jump-started the car and left it at the scene where it was recovered. Other proponents of the DNA say, well, hold on a second, these shoes could have already been in the car. We don't know these are the shoes that Hae Min Lee was wearing. So once again, it seems to be the shoe is on the other foot. I hate using that expression here, but no one seems to agree about whether she was wearing the shoes, when the DNA was recovered, and whether it's useful or not.
And real quick, Mosby made it seem like a big deal that his DNA is not there. How big a deal is that?
Well, I think it's a big deal if you believe that the shoes were taken off of Hae Min Lee's body prior to her burial and prior to the movement of her vehicle when it was later located by police. But if the shoes were already in the vehicle and they weren't on her at the time of the murder, then the significance is much lower. Marilyn Mosby's office has really been picking and choosing what evidence fits their narrative.
Yeah. All right, we shall see. Jeremy Eldridge, thank you again for coming back on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you for joining.
And again, as I said, I have questions about Syed's conviction, but I also have questions about her. That does it for us tonight. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.